Hi everybody. Hey, I want to tell you a little story today. This might kind of count as a day in the life of a guide, or anyway, this story happened to me about 30 years ago. I suppose I'd been guiding maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I had this little wooden drift boat, and anyway, had a couple guys that were going to be with me for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, I think. And started out, they were really nice guys. And first day, we had a pretty good day. Caught a bunch of fish and stuff. And what we were doing back in those days was indicator fishing, just like we do nowadays, only kind of back in those days, I don't know, indicator fishing was kind of viewed differently amongst fly fishermen, I guess. Most people thought of fly fishing as mostly throwing dry flies and that kind of thing. Maybe a dry fly with a dropper fly below it or something like that. But indicator fishing was kind of new, and so was indicators. But anyway, the next day, they came, and one of them had this great big red and white bobber, and he said, "Here, put this on." So I kind of gathered, you know, that was kind of a little bit of a joke, but that was what our fishing and what the fishing warranted doing to catch fish, was to fish the way we were fishing. And they didn't seem to be bothered by it at all. One of them asked me, I can't remember if it was that second day or that first day, if anybody had ever fallen out of my boat. And I said no, and I don't intend to have anybody fall out of my boat. And because it's a real gentle river that we're on, and you know, it shouldn't be an issue. And they said, well, one of us is going to fall out of your boat. We've never gone on a fishing trip where one of us hasn't fallen out of the boat. I said, well, it won't be on this trip. And so, yeah, whatever. So on the third day, after the second day was a pretty good day too. We had a lot of fun getting to know each other, and they were good guys. And the third day, we were going down the river, and in this really calm stretch of water with a pretty deep hole. And all of a sudden, I kind of felt the boat kind of do one of these numbers, and all of a sudden, kabloosh! I looked back behind me, and the guy behind me had literally, I don't know whether he jumped out or fell out. I don't know how he could have. And because I never hit an oar wrong or did anything. And so I looked, and I was just kind of in shock, and I was looking around for life jackets, and I looked down and I watched him sink, and I watched the top of his head go down in this big deep hole, and I just was watching him sink, and his head went out of sight. That's how deep he went in the water. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, his buddy acted like he was in a big panic, and he jumped out. Well, the water was kind of at a high stage. It wasn't, you know, overly flooding, but it was more than normal flow. And so there was no way I could control the boat, because he had a hold of the side of it, and the boat was all tipped. I had no control over the oars, and I'm trying to throw life jackets. My boat's out of control. I got one guy over the board, over the side of the boat, holding the boat on the side. He's trying to reach for his friend. He grabs a hold of his friend, and basically all I could do was just kind of let the current take us, and we kind of washed into a nice gentle shore, and I was about in shock. And granted, our water's really super cold, but the day was really hot that day. I bet it was 110 degrees out Fahrenheit. Anyway, wouldn't you know it, on the other side of the river was kind of one of an older guide who just happened to be there. Probably the last guy I would have liked to have seen, you know, see that happen. So they're all standing there on the bank, and they're holding up like plaques, like you do in the Olympics, with numbers, you know, like they're judges, you know, like 9-6, 9-5, whatever, teasing the guy about his dive into the river. And we pulled up on the shore, and we were getting all kind of dried out and everything, and I was just, you know, pretty naive at that time. And like I said, it was about 30 years ago. And anyway, all of a sudden, I don't know how, it just was the tension. We started laughing, and I'm not kidding you. I don't know if I've ever, we were laughing so hard. I mean, I was crying, I was laughing so hard. And we just sat there on the bank and we were laughing, you know, and we got all dried out and put back together and went back in, and we ended up having supper that night. And you know, the next day, one of them was the guy that fell in was talking about losing his glasses, you know, and even that night at supper, I think, and I don't know whether that was just adding to their joke story or what, but the guy had to have jumped out of my boat. That was just all I could think of, was because I don't, you know, if I did anything, I did nothing to make the boat jerk or anything like that. So that's the only time I've ever had anybody fall out of my boat. And I know one other guide who had a guy that fell out of his boat, but he'd kind of come down the river and kind of hit a tree or kind of sideways a little bit and knocked the boat, and the guy fell out. It wasn't that deep water, and the guy was just fine. But other than that, that's the only instance I've ever heard of that sort of thing happening. And that's, yeah, I've never had anybody really even come close to doing that since. So anyway, that stuck in my mind, and I just thought I'd kind of tell you a funny story. Anyway, hope you're having some fun today. It's a beautiful day out here in the sunshine, and thanks for listening to me one more time.